In 1295, after over 20 years of adventure, Marco Polo finally returned to Venice, Italy. His journey had taken him to the farthest reaches of the known world, and beyond. He had traversed deserts, crossed mountains, and sailed across vast oceans. The experiences he gathered were unparalleled, and his return was highly anticipated by the people of Venice. He was now 41 years old and a seasoned traveler. His face bore the marks of countless adventures, and his eyes held the wisdom of a man who had seen the world in all its glory and hardship. He had journeyed across Asia, seen wonders most people could only dream of, and served Kublai Khan, the powerful Mongol emperor. His tales of the grand courts, the bustling markets, and the majestic landscapes of the East were nothing short of legendary. Venice was a bustling city of merchants and explorers. The streets were filled with the sounds of trade, the clinking of coins, and the chatter of people from all corners of the world. It was a city that thrived on commerce and the exchange of ideas. Marco, with his tales of distant lands, was welcomed home as a hero. The people of Venice were eager to hear his stories, to learn about the exotic places he had visited, and to see the treasures he had brought back. He had brought back riches from the East, silks, spices, and jewels. These treasures were not just valuable in terms of wealth, but they also represented the cultural and commercial connections that Marco had established during his travels. But more importantly, he carried with him stories that would captivate the world. His accounts of the East would later be compiled into a book that would inspire generations of explorers and adventurers. Venice was frequently at war with Genoa, a rival city-state. The conflicts between these two powerful maritime republics were intense and often brutal, as both sought to dominate the trade routes of the Mediterranean. Marco, being a skilled sailor, joined the Venetian navy. His knowledge of navigation and his experience on the seas made him a valuable asset to the Venetian fleet. He commanded a powerful galley warship and fought bravely for his city. His leadership and bravery in battle were well recognized, and he quickly rose through the ranks. However, fate had other plans for Marco Polo. Despite his skills and bravery, he was captured during a naval battle and taken as a prisoner of war. This unexpected twist in his journey would lead to yet another chapter in his extraordinary life. In 1298, during a fierce naval battle against the Genoese, Marco's ship was captured. The battle was intense, with cannon fire echoing across the waves and the clash of swords ringing out as ships collided. The Venetian fleet, though valiant, was no match for the Genoese forces. He was taken as a prisoner of war. The Genoese soldiers, victorious and relentless, rounded up the surviving Venetians, binding their hands and leading them away. The sense of defeat was palpable among the captured men. The Battle of Curzola was a disaster for Venice. The once proud Venetian ships now lay in ruins, their masts broken and hulls shattered. The sea was littered with debris and the bodies of fallen sailors. The Genoese fleet, larger and more powerful, crushed the Venetian ships. Their strategy and sheer numbers overwhelmed the Venetians, leaving little hope for victory. The Genoese celebrated their triumph, their banners flying high. Marco Polo, despite his skill and bravery, was unable to prevent his galley from being overrun. He fought valiantly, but the Genoese forces were too strong. His ship was boarded and he was taken captive along with his crew. Captured along with many of his countrymen, Marco was transported to Genoa. The journey was long and arduous, with the prisoners shackled and guarded closely. They were marched through towns and villages, a grim procession of defeat. There, he was imprisoned in a dark, damp cell. The conditions were harsh, with little light and barely enough food to sustain them. The walls were cold and the air was thick with the smell of mold and despair. Life as a prisoner was a stark contrast to the freedom and excitement of his travels. Marco often reflected on his journeys, the vast landscapes he had seen, and the diverse cultures he had encountered. Now he was confined to a small dark space, his future uncertain. Despite the hardship, Marco remained unbroken. His spirit was resilient, and he found ways to endure the harsh conditions. He held on to the hope that one day he would be free again. He befriended a fellow prisoner, a writer named Rustichello da Pisa. Rustichello was a storyteller, and the two men quickly formed a bond over their shared love of adventure and tales of distant lands. Rustichello was intrigued by Marco's tales of the Orient. Marco recounted his travels in vivid detail, describing the exotic places he had visited and the incredible experiences he had had. Rustichello listened intently, captivated by the stories. Together, in that cramped prison cell, they began to collaborate on a book that would change the world. Marco narrated his adventures, and Rustichello wrote them down, creating a manuscript that would become one of the most famous travelogues in history. Prison life was harsh. The food was meager, often just stale bread and thin gruel that barely kept the prisoners alive. The air was thick with the stench of sweat and despair, mingling with the dampness of the stone walls. The cells were dark and damp, with only a small window letting in a sliver of light. The days seemed to stretch on forever, each one blending into the next in a monotonous cycle of suffering. Time moved slowly, and the prisoners often lost track of the days, weeks, and months. But Marco found solace in sharing his stories. He would gather the other prisoners around and transport them to far-off lands with his tales. Rustichello, a skilled writer, listened intently as Marco spoke of Kublai Khan's magnificent court, the vast Gobi Desert, and the bustling cities of China. He was captivated by Marco's vivid descriptions. Marco's stories were filled with wonder and adventure. He spoke of the grand palaces, the intricate architecture, and the vibrant markets teeming with life. Rustichello could almost see the scenes unfolding before his eyes. He was amazed by Marco's descriptions of exotic animals like elephants and pandas, creatures he had only heard of in legends. Marco's tales of strange customs and rituals were completely foreign to Europeans. Marco described the intricate workings of the Khan's postal system, a network so efficient that messages could travel across the vast empire in a matter of days. He spoke of the use of paper money, a concept that was revolutionary to Rustichello. The burning of black stones or coal for fuel was another marvel that Marco recounted. These were things Rustichello had never even imagined. He realized that Marco's experiences had to be shared with the world. Rustichello began to write down Marco's stories, capturing every detail with precision. He knew that these tales would open the eyes of many to the wonders of the East. The use of paper money, the bustling markets, the grand palaces, and the exotic animals were all meticulously recorded. Rustichello's writing brought Marco's adventures to life. The stories spread far and wide, capturing the imagination of people across Europe. Marco's tales of the East became legendary, inspiring explorers and adventurers for generations to come. These were things Rustichello had never even imagined. He realized that Marco's experiences had to be shared with the world. And so, the tales of Marco Polo were born, a testament to the power of storytelling and the enduring human spirit. He realized that Marco's experiences had to be shared with the world. And so, the tales of Marco Polo were born, a testament to the power of storytelling and the enduring human spirit. Using Marco's detailed recollections, Rustichello began to write. He translated Marco's Venetian dialect into French, the language of educated people in Europe at the time. The book, titled The Travels of Marco Polo, described in vivid detail Marco's 24-year journey through Asia. Rustichello, a master storyteller, brought Marco's adventures to life. He described the dangers Marco faced, the wonders he witnessed, and the knowledge he gained. The book was a blend of travelogue, adventure story, and historical record. It was a massive undertaking, but after several years the manuscript was complete. When Marco was finally released from prison in 1299, he carried with him not only his memories but also a written account of his extraordinary journey. Upon his release, Marco returned to Venice a changed man. He was no longer a young adventurer but a mature and seasoned traveler. He had faced hardship and emerged with a story that would resonate through the ages. He married Donata Badoer, the daughter of a wealthy merchant. They had 3 daughters, Fantina, Bellella, and Moretta. Marco settled into Venetian life, becoming a successful merchant and a respected member of society. He regaled his family and friends with tales of his adventures, bringing the pages of his book to life. People were captivated by his stories, and word of his incredible journey spread throughout Venice and beyond. Copies of the Travels of Marco Polo were made by hand and began to circulate throughout Europe. The book was a sensation. People were amazed by Marco's descriptions of a world so different from their own. Kings and queens, scholars and merchants, priests and peasants, all were eager to read about the wonders of the East. Marco's book opened a window to a world unknown to most Europeans. His descriptions of China's wealth and sophistication challenged the Eurocentric worldview of the time. People began to realize that their continent did not hold a monopoly on knowledge and civilization. The Travels of Marco Polo had a profound impact on European exploration. Marco's vivid descriptions of Asia's riches, its spices, silks, and precious stones, fueled the imaginations of merchants and adventurers. His book inspired a new generation of explorers, including Christopher Columbus. Columbus, seeking a westward route to the Indies, carried a copy of Marco's book with him on his voyages. He annotated it heavily, dreaming of finding the fabled cities and riches that Marco described. Marco Polo's book helped to usher in a new era of exploration and cultural exchange between Europe and the East. As Marco Polo grew older, he continued to share his stories. He became known throughout Europe as Marco Milioni, a nickname that reflected the countless tales he told of his travels. In 1323, Marco Polo fell ill. On his deathbed, surrounded by his family, he was urged to confess that his stories were fabricated. Marco, with a twinkle in his eye, simply replied, "I have not told half of what I saw." On January 8, 1324, at the age of 69, Marco Polo died peacefully in his home in Venice. He was buried in the church of San Lorenzo, leaving behind a legacy that would inspire generations to come. Marco Polo's book, The Travels, continues to captivate readers centuries after it was written. It has been translated into countless languages and remains one of the most important travelogues ever written. His story reminds us of the power of curiosity, the thrill of discovery, and the importance of sharing our experiences with the world. Marco Polo, the Venetian adventurer, showed us that the world is a vast and wondrous place, full of surprises for those who dare to explore it. His legacy is not just one of geographical discovery, but also one of expanding human understanding and fostering a sense of wonder about the world around us.